Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I want to start out by first telling you guys, please consider subscribing to my new YouTube channel. A link to it will be down in the description below. It's for all things not flight simulators. If you guys are interested in supporting me and my other creativity, I would really appreciate to see you guys there. Again, it's everything from survival games, driving games, you name it. Anything outside of flight simulation will be on that channel. Now, what is today's video? Today's video is all about Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 Deep Dive. They posted a stream yesterday that was all about a deep dive of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, and I'm going to try to break it down to the key points. This will be a multiple part video. Today we're going to be talking about things like how they've listened to the community, thin client and the launch times, installation examples, rolling cache, turbulence, wind effects, particle effects and disruption, air surfaces, you name it. There's going to be a lot that we're going to cover in this video. I'm going to try to keep these videos down to about a half hour each, stay as close to that as I can while hitting the key points and giving some of my thoughts based on that. So these videos are going to have everything that you need to know about Microsoft Flight Simulator and anything that I think could be a potential gotcha and things that you might want to watch out for, such as internet speed, network speed, hard drive space, things like that you're going to want to consider. There will be timestamps down in the description below if there's any particular section you guys want to go after. As always, folks, I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, hit that like and subscribe, and let's get started. If you are interested in acquiring any of my Overkill's tutorial guides for Microsoft Flight Simulator, or simply interested in supporting the channel, please consider joining us on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides, as well as any future releases that come down the road. Patreon link can be found in the description below.
Overkill simulations, watch us as we fly. Overkill simulations, a thrill will never die in the heart.
All right, so the first thing that I took away from this is in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, one of the things that they said in their briefing was that they really took the simulation world to a new level. And I think we can all agree that they did. They did one of their goals was to do a major update every month, and in many ways they did, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But what we're going to find in this 2024 brief is that they really did listen to the community. A lot of the changes that have been made were absolutely complaints and issues that we all had, or maybe features that we all requested. And when I say we all, I just mean generalized as a community, that it was a complaint or feature request that came up often. So they really took the feedback in, and it was sort of comforting to hear this and then see it in action. They have a lot of live play video and a lot of developer demonstrations showing how a lot of this stuff is impacting. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, the one thing I'm going to tell you, is going to change the way you fly. If you are a gamer and you play this in full simulation mode, you're going to struggle. That's just flat and simple. What I mean by a gamer, if you're someone who plays Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 as more of an arcade style, which is perfectly fine, right? I mean, enjoy the sim as you want to enjoy the sim. That's not meant as a shot at anybody. But if you are someone who is going to take that game mentality, that arcade mentality, and go into 2024 with its maximum simulation enabled, you're going to struggle. And even some sim pilots like myself and many of you who are diehard simmers who want to do as accurate as possible, you're going to be shocked, and it's going to take you by surprise if you're not ready for it. So I really want to commend them right out of the gate for they did listen to us in this. This is quite impressive. So let's get started. All right, so first let's talk about the first new feature, obviously, that we're all aware of, is that they have moved primarily to the cloud. So you have a thin client and you have a thick client. I work in IT, I work in software support for a telephony software. That's what I do during the old day job. So let's break down so you understand. A thick client is like Microsoft 2020. It is an application that is installed that houses all of the necessary information and files in order to operate whatever software it is that is necessary. A thin client is going to be a minimal impact, minimal installation client that uses an API or some sort of protocol to reach out to a server base that's going to have all the necessary information for it to run. This requires networking or internet capability. Okay, typically you'll have an internal server at a company, for example, Microsoft Outlook, okay, to access your email. Your Outlook is a thin client. The application server of Exchange is what's actually housing all of your emails and has all of the data that you need in order to do that, right? The Outlook client is just merely reaches out to the server, grabs all the information that's pertinent to you, and as well as allows you to send, okay? That the same, and it doesn't matter how you use it, or it may reach out to Google. If you have your Outlook connected to Gmail, the Outlook client reaches out to the Gmail server, pulls your emails down. The same principle here. It's going to be a minimal installation where that's using cache as its source. And we're going to show a slide here in just a minute about how that cache works. So at first I was really skeptical about this because it's going to require a pretty beefy internet connection, and I'm still a little concerned so far. We still have more to go through, and obviously it's going to require testing and updating, but I still think internet capability is going to be a hindering point, but not necessarily in the aspect that I initially thought. So for example, the rolling cache is going to work a little bit differently than what we've seen before, and it's going to house things a bit differently than what we saw. So the fundamentals of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 and how they're working their client are based on these key points. It allows Microsoft Flight Simulator to continue to grow to over 10,000 plus add-ons, dozens of World Cities updates, and 100 plus aircraft airports. Now, with that being said, I want to kick this one out right out of the gate. Anything that is third party that you would currently put into a community folder now, the community folder will still exist. So you still have the option to maintain things like third party aircraft and scenery locally on your machine, which won't require any kind of internet-based reach out in order to obtain that data every time. So the community folder will still be local. And this is, I think, how they were able to state that 90%, 95%, whatever that percentage was, of all third-party add-ons that currently work will still be usable in 2024 because the community folder still exists. You will still be able to manage it, add and remove certain add-ons if you want that are third-party that you have installed yourself. So I want to knock that out of the park right now. Everything is not going to the cloud, and that's why they say backwards compatible community folder is still there on that third line there. But the minimum spec, they say this helps keep the minimum specifications low and allows for lower spec devices. That is true. In regard to data retrieval, memory usage, possibly, for me, that's still a gray area, and I'll have to see it in action. I'm not doubting them. It's just one of those like, let me see it. I think, but for graphic settings, don't let that fool you. For graphic settings, CPU and GPU are still going to be just as required, just as high focus if you're looking to really bump that graphics detail up to its highest capabilities, right? So that's still going to be something that you have to consider. But as far as data retrieval, as long as you're willing to tone down your graphics settings to meet your graphics capability, right? I do agree that it's going to require less CPU and things like that to acquire things like, again, the shader cache and things like that, and your scenery cache. So let's talk about that. Reduced installation and load times. This was pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie. It was a shocker, and we have some footage here. So give me just a second here. So before we start the footage here, let's talk about what we got. We're going to have Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 showing here on the left, and you're going to have 2024 showing here on the right and how it all loads in. So this is literally starting from a fresh installation is what they've got going on here. Basically, what they show here is within 5 minutes. Now, again, internet speed, processor, it's going to vary a little, right? But this is what you are capable of. Like someone like myself, I have over a gig download speed here at the house. And my computer, I think, is more than fast enough to maintain this, so I should probably hit something similar to this. But again, it's going to be based on those factors. But check this out. And the video is sped up, obviously. So 1,000 times speed up. But watch the installation. Time to launch. They have launched the sim. This is from an initial installation, 5 minutes. And they're launching the sim, starting their free flights. 2 hours. And we all know it. We've all been there. We've all reinstalled Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. 2 hour time before you are even, at your world map. So got disk size of 23 gigs and 160 gigs. Now, I don't think it's still quite that large anymore. This must have been early on, but hell, it might be. I don't know. I haven't checked mine in quite a while. But 23 gigs to 160 gigs, 2 hours from the time you hit install to the time you're actually at the launch pad. And then here you got a total time launch of 5 minutes. That is really impressive. I'm really blown away by that. And so that's a really big kicker. And that is another advantage to the client. Okay. So let's keep. All right. So previously, as I said, we were going to talk about rolling cache. Previously, here's how it all worked. Anything that was in yellow, planes, airports, points of interest, meshes, and textures were stored locally on your machine, right? And that's part of what caused such a delay in the load times that we've all, learned to deal with, but on more than one occasion, we've all been sick and tired of, right? That's what causes the exorbitant launch times, was the rolling cache. Hang on, guys. My knees are killing me. I don't know why. So that was the big kicker. But so now what they've done here is everything's in the cache. Cache size can still be set as it was before. Now here's how this all works. So that way nobody has to worry about how much data we're talking here. The cache only updates. So this is where that internet connection comes into play as you move to a new area. So I think general aviation pilots are going to see the most benefit from this than commercial airliners. And it really depends on how that cache and how that imagery is going to be loaded, especially when you're up at cruise altitude. So it only changes if you get into a new aircraft that you haven't previously used. If you fly to a new zone that you haven't flown before, that will then be put into the cache. And obviously the cache size. As that cache size gets reached, then older data is going to have to be overwritten and it's going to be replaced, right? That's just the nature of rolling cache. But that's only going to be impacted based on when you fly new aircraft, new scenery, right? Or a cache size limit. So this is very, very handy in the aspect that, like I said, and this is why I think general aviation pilots are going to take the most advantage of this, or bush pilots are going to get the most advantage out of this, because it's not going to require a whole lot of internet connection in order to maintain that if you're flying in the same zone. Now, one of the things that I really do like, as you guys have probably seen in multiple videos, is as you load in, which I think we have some footage of that too. Let's go ahead and grab that. As you load in, the caching is already begun. But again, this is where internet connection, there's no ands or buts about it. Internet connection is going to play a huge part in this. Now, this is a handcrafted, the thing that I call it this. Okay, so they said handcrafted airport and from a streamed world update. One of the things that they pointed out was that Osobo and Microsoft were not responsible for any of the world updates. They were always done by third-party developers such as Gaia or Orbix, communities like that who do the third-party airports and third-party sceneries. I'm still kind of curious how that works. Now, again, going back to the community folder, my understanding from reaching this or watching this is that from the community folder, if you have third-party sceneries installed, then you won't have to worry about that particular issue. It's going to pull from the community folder first. That is my understanding. The way I took it is that the community folder is still going to take precedence over streamed content. Okay, so if you have a third-party scenery that you really want to use that is already in your community folder, that is going to take priority over anything that is streamed, and therefore my understanding is that that third-party data or that streamed data won't be pulled down from the internet. It will just use what's already locally available. That's my understanding of it. I could be mistaken on that, so don't quote me on that just yet. But that's the way that I interpreted the way that they described it in the demo. Excuse me. So, but this is pretty slick, right? And that is one of the advantages to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is that we don't have to do with this anymore, right? When it comes to the third-party sceneries, there were over, I think they said that right now, with all third-party add-ons and scenery and world updates, you'd be looking at over 2 terabytes of data for Microsoft Flight Simulator in order to maintain that. So that has been completely removed. That is the nice thing about that, is all of your world updates, any of the scenery updates that are already provided by Microsoft or Asobo are no longer going to be required. We're not going to have to deal with that anymore. You're not going to have to select which ones you download. When you fly into New Zone, it's just there. So unless there's going to be an update to the thin client itself, it shouldn't be an issue that we have to worry about anymore. So that part is really nice. There's going to be a lot of advantages to this. There really are. All right, it's that time again before we get started here. Ooh, yes. Today the flavor is Ultra Strawberry again. Absolutely amazing. It's great stuff. Anyway, it's funny too because I don't normally like strawberry. So now we're going to get into the aerodynamic simulations and a lot of things they've done. This is where I was talking about earlier, where even for experienced sim pilots, we're going to have to pay attention now. Things are going to change. And I was really blown away by how far they went into this. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So first off, surface aerodynamics, 5 times more than in 2020 and all the way down to 10 centimeters up to 100 centimeters. And this means double-decker aircraft, V-tails, modeled engines. They really went above and beyond. Optimize the aircraft, CFD. Again, that's going to be computed fluid dynamics, I believe is what's called. I think I have the C wrong. But anyway. It basically what it means is that the environment is always going to be changing based on all of the factors that are in the environment. So let's talk about that. There's going to be no impact on performance. It's a multi-threaded computation, native to helicopters, and you're also going to get engine wash. So let's back up for a second here. And actually no, let's keep going through these highlights, then we'll get through it all. New wake turbulence, again, multi-threaded, realistic, up to 6 minutes. Now, we're going to talk about that, but what they're saying is that the wake turbulence can hang around for up to 6 minutes, but it goes beyond that. And then optimize atmospheric airflow up to 10 kilometers plus, updrafts, turbulence, and wind shears. Now, let's take a look at a couple of examples that they provided us. All right, so first let's take a look at what we're seeing here. These are atmospheric condition simulations. So this is like a developer mode. That's why we can see all the impacts. So this is going to be your thermals, your turbulence, aerodynamic impacts that are caused by the surface of the Earth, right? So you can see the way that they're moving up, coming up off of these mountainsides, and then the different directional changes that are coming up over here, just simply from the thermals and the heating of the Earth's crust causing turbulence. Here we're seeing something far more impressive. This is this is engine disturbance, right? So now you are going to feel, as real pilots do, the airflow caused by the engines obviously affects things like your elevators and your vertical stabilizers, and definitely aircraft behind you. This is going to be another one. Like, just wait, we'll get into it. This is incredible. But so now as a pilot, as you increase power, you're really going to feel significantly more than what we did in 2020 or what we do in 2020, the effect that the engines have on your air surfaces, even down to a Cessna, right? That forward propeller affecting your vertical stabilizers as well as your elevators. Right? You're going to start to feel that now. That's actually going to be something that you're going to have to take into consideration, which one of the things that, just to talk about for a second to get off topic, they didn't specifically mention this here, but I'm sort of more excited about, is now that's going to change things like ground effect, and it's going to change things, and they did talk about ground effect, but it's going to change things like ground looping for tail draggers. Tail draggers, I think, based on what we're seeing here in the modeling that's being done, tail draggers are going to become intense. There was something, for those of you who don't know, that a tail dragger suffers with, has to deal with, called ground looping. And I don't know the specifics of how it happens, okay? But I understand what happens. As a tail dragger comes down and drops its main wheels down, or even when that tail wheel comes down, there is a disturbance that causes a rotation underneath that tail wheel. That the pilot, essentially what you have to do on the rudder pedals is you have to quickly dance your way through it. You have to really, really dance that vertical stabilizer back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the idea behind it is to it helps you maintain control. Again, I don't understand all the principles of it and how it happens. But what happens is if you don't, this actually happened to my father once. The first time he flew a high performance Super Cub, his trainer or the pilot just sort of said, "Yep, land it." It didn't really warn him about it. The trainer took full responsibility. My dad's okay. The plane was not. But what happened is that didn't happen. And the tail essentially tries to loop itself over and can cause the aircraft to roll, to flip, all kinds of nasty stuff. It's a very scary situation until you start to slow down where the air becomes stable underneath the aircraft again. I'm willing to bet that's going to be a nightmare with this new dynamic. So let's go ahead and watch the video. You guys can see everything in action as we get into also now wake turbulence. Wake turbulence is a disturbance on the in the air caused by the aircraft in front of you. It is much more prevalent with larger aircraft, but can happen to any plane, such as smaller aircraft, as well as even helicopters. Now, here you guys can see how far back that wake turbulence has now taken effect. This is why spacing is so important with air traffic controllers. Again, for those of you who may not be aware, this is why air traffic controllers, even at larger aircraft, require a minimum spacing. And that spacing is usually dependent on what type of aircraft landed or took off that was in front of you. Okay, a much larger aircraft, A380, 747, C5 Galaxy, C17, something that's going to generate a lot of power and a lot of wake, they're going to have to space you out a bit further, especially if you're a much smaller aircraft. Something like a Cessna or even a private business jet landing directly behind even a 737 in the midst of a maximum wake turbulence, it can flip you, it can roll you, it can do all kinds of really awful things. Wake turbulence is actually a really scary thing, just most simulators don't model it. Okay, so here, and again, it can hang around for up to 6 minutes. But one of the things that they talk about, but they don't demonstrate, that they did also mention in this video was that wake turbulence is also impacted by wind, meaning that the wind can push that wake turbulence. So the wake turbulence being generated in a rotation like this. Okay, so with a twin engine aircraft like this, it's going to be even more significant, but anything with two wings. It comes off both the wingtips, is my understanding, as well as obviously very much so from the engines, from the thrust. And it creates a rotation like this, right? And so if you fly directly into that, that's where that whole danger of it can flip you, it can roll you, it can toss you, it can do all kinds of nasty stuff to you. And so look at how long that's hanging out. That wake turbulence is still active right there, right? So there's going to be no more of this just taking off and rolling right after another aircraft. And one of the things that they stated in the video was that this is going to affect both AI and real world multiplayer. So whether it is a friend who took off in front of you or just another player, right? If you have multiplayer turned on and you can see other players and activity on the airport you're taking off from, you're going to have to pay attention. If you're flying a Cessna and they took off in a 737 and you have all of your simulation settings turned on, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to make sure that it's safe for you to take off. But again, they also stated that the wind can push. All right. So just because you're not taking off in this run, let's say we're taking off somewhere like LAX or Phoenix, where they have two parallel runways, that wake turbulence, let's say you're taking off on, I don't know, 2-4 left at, LA, and somebody like a 737 or bigger just took off on 2-4 right, that wind can push that wake turbulence onto your runway. So and they modeled that. So this is one of the areas where I said we're going to have to start paying attention to how we fly. It's going to change the things that you have to watch for. As you're flying in, you're going to have to start paying attention to whether or not a big aircraft just took off or landed. You're going to have to start really watching for that kind of stuff. So I'm really impressed by this. It's really going to change the way we fly. And for you rotor heads, here's that same activity being generated by a helicopter. Okay, so you're going to have that same intensity. Again, if you're taking off in a Cessna or something right behind a rotor, you're going to feel it. You're going to have that disturbance. It's not going to be quite in the same aspect. And if you notice that the rotation and the way that it's happening is significantly different than what we saw with like that of an airline or a fixed wing. So the impact on the aircraft is going to be different coming from the helicopter than it is going to be coming from a fixed wing. So not only do you have to pay attention to whether or not an aircraft took off or landed, what size that aircraft was, but what type of aircraft it is, so you can understand what's going to happen to your plane potentially if you come into the mix of that. So again, really high detail. They did listen. These are a lot of the features that were requested. And again, you guys can see the turbulence and the environmental effects happening up there as well behind the scenes. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about for the environment is particle effects or particle density. So here they have a smoke canister on the ground, and this is going to be really cool for things like air shows. Just on the fun part, it's going to be tells me it's going to affect things like your flags and whatnot, and also things like dust, dirt, debris. There's a lot of modeling, especially third party, that could happen with this that they probably haven't even mentioned yet. But so here we have a helicopter taking off with a smoke screen around. Watch what happens. Notice that the particles are now being impacted by the rotor. There's that vortex we were talking about, that rotation being caused by the ground effect or by the rotor wash. So again, really impressive way that they've now implemented this. And again, they've stated that this is going to also affect the environment around it. So not just smoke, things like that, but as I stated before, dust, dirt, debris, grass, trees, anything that's behind or around the aircraft that would normally be impacted by rotor wash, jet wash, prop wash. You're now going to be dealing with it. That's going to be another contender, which also means, as we were talking about previously, again, you get directly behind something like a 737 A380 as it goes full power, and you're in your little airplane or an ultralight. It's going to, my understanding and where we're seeing here, it's going to toss your aircraft right to the freaking moon. So be cautious of where you are now. And this is, again, comes back to that. If you are playing on full simulation mode, you're going to have to pay attention to what you're doing. It's really going to require far more readiness and situation awareness in order to really take the simulation experience seriously and get the most out of it. I think this is also a big improvement on a completely side topic for people who enjoy things like VATSIM and things like that, because if the pilot is wanting to get the most experience, they're going to have to pay attention. This also means that you ATC controllers out there, and I'm sure you guys are already doing a fantastic job, but ATC controllers are now going to have to take that into consideration as well. Separation is now a very real thing, and it's going to have to be something that everybody pays attention to, but not just separation, but simply taxiing down the runway, engine startups. You're going to have to pay attention to what you're doing and who's behind you and around you when you start your engines up. All of this is now your run-ups, right? All of this now is going to take a whole new level of consideration and, again, situational awareness, Lana, in order to get the simulation experience that really we've all been looking for. So this is really impressive. Like I said, after watching this, I am super excited about 2024 now. I really am.